the time of a business owner. So let's go ahead and get this started. I have, before I share my screen and start kind of digging into like the mechanics of what we're talking about today, I wanted to start off with just talking about what statuses are, why we use them, and all that stuff. So the first thing that the concept that we need to make sure that everybody understands is that in ResponsiBid, every customer is in a status. Now, that's actually, in my example here, I'm going to show you that from a CSV import perspective, that's not always true. But if you're working with somebody in ResponsiBid, they'll always be in a status, and I say a because it will be a singular status. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, and I'm the kind of person that as soon as I understand why something is, then I can get along a lot better. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the kind of the whys, why everybody is in one and only one status. So in ResponsiBid at this point, every person has a bid associated with them. Now, if you import somebody, the bid might have nothing in it, but if someone gets brought in through the call screen or somebody comes in through your website or you get an online quote, everybody is a person and a bid, and put them together and you've got the person who you're following up with and getting authorization from the job, and then you're also getting kind of the array of services that someone with a bid would be offered. I tell people sometimes to think of it this way, is that if your favorite restaurant had a specific menu for each person, but maybe the same items on the menu for every person, that's kind of how ResponsiBid is. If you walk into that restaurant and they say, oh, cool, you're Kirk Kempton, here's your menu. And I might have all the same items on the menu, like chicken cordon bleu and pizza or whatever. They're pretty much the same things, but you charge differently for each particular person. So that's how it works. Now, some people, they'll only have a few things on the menu because they didn't get a quote for everything. And in ResponsiBid, you can constantly add to the menu of services. And if you want, you can even take away. But the important thing is that there's a person and a bid, or a person and a menu. And the menu, the bid, is editable. We can edit that and change, make changes to it. That's another webinar for another day, but it's fully customizable. And so is the follow-up with the person. Now, today, as we talk about statuses, a person is always going to fall into some sort of a category of them in the buying cycle. So we always want to follow up with people who are at a specific part of the buying cycle a certain way. And I think right now is a good idea for me to share my screen with you. Hopefully you can all see it. What I'm going to do is I have a test account here. And the first thing I'm going to point out to you is that a bunch of the people in here were all CSV imports. So they neither have services nor a status. This is very irregular, but if you do an import of people, that's sometimes how it's going to go. Now, if I go to settings and I head over to my follow-up builder, you'll see that I have all the default statuses. And I apologize, our server's running a little bit slow tonight. We're running some stuff against the server right now. But you can see that there are some statuses that don't have any icon next to them, and there are other ones that you may have already built and have an edit icon next to them. So the first thing that's important to understand is that every customer or every business is going to have somebody that falls in to one of these statuses, and that's why we provide them already. But it's important. A lot of people get in here and they think that scheduled and closed is the same thing when it's not. So I'm going to just take the time here to explain to you what each status means. Open bids is someone who's gotten a quote and they have not moved forward from there. We should look at open as the gateway that we want to get everybody out of. We don't want people to be open bids. If they've gotten a bid, they're never going to be more prime for making a decision than right after the bid. Now, I get it. Sometimes they're going to need longer or take longer. That's fine. But an open bid is something that we want to be very, very short-lived. Now, a pending bid, I'm going to show you how someone can make themselves go pending here in a minute. But a pending bid is someone who has expressed interest that they want to book the job, but as far as ResponsiBid knows, they have not booked the job. Now, the reason I say as far as ResponsiBid knows is because it is unfortunate when I go into someone's account and everyone's either open or pending. That means I installed it on my website, I don't do any more bids through ResponsiBid, and ResponsiBid will never get any more feedback in order to continue people through the process. That is a bad thing. We want you to be able to really exercise the strength of ResponsiBid, and to do that, you'll have to move people through the different sequences. Now, we do allow quite a bit of auto rolling, I call it. Auto rolling means someone moving themselves from open to pending, or scheduled jobs moving to closed. But there are certain things like scheduling a job that ResponsiBid does not currently offer customers the ability to do, and that is going to be a ways off. So the only thing a customer can ever make themselves is pending. But if you'll exercise the ResponsiBid's abilities and let ResponsiBid know when you schedule somebody, which is the next status, then ResponsiBid can continue them through the process. Now, scheduled means we're going to do a job, we've already selected the services, and the date is in the future. Okay, so a scheduled job is not closed until that date moves to the past. Now, you could manually move someone to close, but you cannot close somebody to a date in the future. And just like you can't schedule someone to a date in the past. So these are kind of like, they're kind of two peas in a pod, so to speak, but they're very different. And maybe even some would say the exact opposite. So scheduled in the future, closed in the past. And you would want to communicate with someone who has a job coming up in the future very differently than someone who is closed and you've already performed work for. Of course, here's the big sad face, declined. Declined would be somebody who's told you, I don't want any work from you. You gave me a bid, but I didn't accept it. Now, visit for bid is a very interesting status because it's just like scheduled, because you are scheduling a date in the future, but you're scheduling to come out and visit them to give them a quote. Now, there's several ways you can get into it, and I'm going to spend some time on the webinar showing you how to do that. But visit for bid means that you've scheduled a date in the future, but you only have to have, in order to put them in that status, all you need is a name, a first name, and a street address so that you can go to the house. If ResponsiBid doesn't have any other information, you can put in as much or as little as you want so that the quote can continue on site, but it does not, the quote will not necessarily be given. So that's visit for bid. Now, this is a custom status that I built for an example tonight. I'm going to go ahead and click on the edit button here. What I call this status is contact me in. And every status can be one of two types of a status when you create a custom status. You'll notice that the future date will probably remind you of scheduled and visit because they work exactly the same way. You can have this status as long as you tell ResponsiBid about a date in the future. Okay. Now, another type of way to set up a status, if you're building a custom status, is to do it as a present day status. Now, present day status is like all of the other ones, where an open bid begins operating from the moment it goes into the status. Okay, so future status is what we want to talk about in this particular. I'm going to explain how I'm using it, but you'll have to kind of think about it when you create a status. Is it relational to a date in the future, or is this status relational to just the moment I put them into the status? So once you've done that, you can name it whatever you'd like. You can click on Save Changes. I don't need to. I didn't make any changes. And now this is a status that I think everybody should make. I think this is probably one of the neatest ninja tricks that you'll learn, and that is that sometimes you'll give a quote to someone, or you'll do some work for someone, and they'll tell me, or they'll say, hey, I am not ready to make a decision now, but if you contact me in 2 months, then I'll be ready. All right. So what ResponsiBid can do is allow you to set it to contact them at a certain date. And then what I did is I created 2 steps. So the first status is 0 days after the status starts, is scheduled to happen. So if I schedule it for 2 months from today, then 0 days later at 10 a.m., there's going to be an email from me, to the contact's email. I'm going to carbon copy myself, from me. And then the subject of the email is, I'm reaching out as promised. Hi, so-and-so. I want to make good on the promise I made to contact you today. Are you ready to have us out? You can set this to say whatever you'd like. but like any other sequence. And we're going to do another webinar about really how to build out your follow-up sequences. The most important thing you gather from today is how statuses work. But you can see that I'm sending out an email on the day that I promised to, and then I'm sending an email to myself from myself with the subject, it's time to call whoever that person is, their first and last name. First name, last name wants us to reach out and schedule some work as discussed previously. Okay. The other thing I'd like to draw your attention to, even though it's not necessarily part of today, is you can see that I've enabled both of these so it'll actually work. So let's head on over and go through a quick scenario. So here we have the Travel Lodge. They got a quote, looks like for a few things. You can see here. And Chauncey, let's say I talk to Chauncey and Chauncey says, yeah, can you call me in a week? So let's say that I say, all right, I'll call you next Tuesday. Great. These times are irrelevant. They're there for your use on maybe a different scenario, which I'll run through with you in a little while. They won't make a lot of sense right now, so I'm not going to worry about it. And I've got a Google Calendar integration set up here, so it's asking me for time and if I should create an event. I am not going to create an event, and I'm going to click Book It. Now, I probably should have taken a minute to show you that when this person, well, actually, I'll show you here in a second. So you can see now that on April 5th, there's going to be that email at 10 a.m. that goes out to the customer. So we another email that goes out to me. Now I'm just looking at this and I'm realizing I don't like step 1 and step 2. It's not very descriptive. So let's head back over real quick to the follow-up builder. And let's go to contact me in. And I'm going to change this to email the customer. And I'm going to do this to prompt me for phone call. Okay, I'm going to save those. All right, let's head back over there. I always recommend naming these steps just because they're so much easier to deal with. So here we are back in Travel Lodge and back down to the status and follow up. You see here, we've got the email to the customer and the phone call reminder for me. Now, this status and as we talk about statuses tonight, this status represents the part of the buying cycle that the customer's in. These follow-ups that I've turned on and that they're scheduled to go, they represent the way that you would follow up with a person who's in that type of a status. Okay. Now, what's great is that when you're at the dashboard, you'll notice that you can look at people in specific statuses. So I can look up people by status on the dashboard, and I can also notice when I'm looking at just recent activity, I can see what's going on in here too by status. But when you properly use the steps, you can also use emails, as I have, to prompt me to make a phone call. Now, the final thing I want to show you about this particular status is that this email to the customer, it's going to use by default the template. If I leave it alone, it's just going to do what I told it to do by default. But maybe I would say, you asked about talking after your boss came into town. Now, if I just save the changes, I'm not going to trigger this step to go now, which I could stop this step. I can do all sorts of neat stuff in here. But by saving these changes, you'll now notice that when I refresh this customer's profile, you'll notice that there's now an edit pencil next to this. That means that this has been updated by me for this customer, and it will only change if I change this specific email. Now, going into the follow-up builder, if I edit what would happen in this step, it would affect everyone who's not edited and has it scheduled for the future, but it would not change anything for this customer because I've customized it to them. So it's a quick important note for you, but at the end of the day, when you go back into the follow-up builder, it's all about the buckets, setting up your 80% or 90% of the scenarios that you're going to encounter, and then the ability to fine-tune the specific things that you need to fine-tune for each specific customer. So that's how that would work. Now, there's a couple other statuses that, that some people find very, very useful. If you click on the plus button here, you can see I just added a new sequence, and this is also a new status, right? And I'm going to call this open commercial. I'm going to use that as a present date status because I'm going to use this exactly the same way I would use open. But now when I save changes and I click in there, I can start creating the follow-up that I would want to use for an open bid that's commercial. Now, the reason I'm pointing this out to you is that this follow-up is going to be very much good for your normal open bids. In fact, every bid that goes through, if you run a bid through the call screen or a bid comes from your website and it's a brand new bid, then it will be an open bid when you're done. You would need to manually change it to that. That's why I definitely recommend A, giving yourself a few minutes on this first email, but B, making this first email pretty generic. Let's not talk about your house. Let's not talk about your project. Let's just be kind of general and, hey, I'm glad to help you. I want to, look forward to serving you. And give yourself a day or so. In this case, you can see that I've got a 1-day delay before my text message goes out. I don't even have a number for this account yet. But that way, you can go into a customer's profile after they get a bid and you realize, hey, this person's commercial, or whatever you set up the status for. Maybe you've got open property manager, right? That'll just give you a minute to go through, change it to the status that you want, and then you'll be able to see that I have a date scheduled to go at midnight today. So obviously that's in the past and it leaves a little bit of love. But that's how, let's go back in there and show you. Come on. All right. So, it also can't go because we didn't actually set anything up. So that's something you'll want to turn off until you have it ready to go. So open commercial, pending commercial, those are, if you're doing a lot of commercial work, or if you only do commercial work, then you would probably just use these all as commercial stuff, and then you'd maybe make an open residential, right? So for your kind of not so normal stuff. But as everybody's kind of confined into a status, I usually recommend to people that if you find yourself doing something a couple times a week that's outside of the bounds of what you have in here, then it's time to probably make a status for that workflow. You can add an infinite number of statuses. I don't recommend having more statuses than you're really going to need. It needs to be easy enough to use. Your employees need to be able to be trained on it. So my goal is to have as many as you need, but not so many that you're going to hate using it. Okay. And the best way to make sure that happens is to create a status as you've gotten into the workflow where, hey, I'm doing this a couple times a week. And yeah, if you're doing something once a month, maybe that's not something you necessarily want to automate. Maybe that's something that you figure out a workaround for yourself. Or if it's once a year, obviously that's something you're not necessarily going to want to build anything for. So there's a couple other reasons you might do a custom status. So not just commercial, but let's say that a specific job type that you have. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new status here. I actually did it twice. That's all right. So maybe you have a scenario where after you've closed the job and they're an annoying customer, okay? Or maybe it's a soda blasting type job where those customers need to be followed up a certain way before the job. So it's a scheduled but soda blasting, okay? I'm going to use a present date, and I'm going to say this is a closed mean customer. And that will bother me. So let's put a capital in there. Okay, so what I could do is I could make it so that the job is scheduled. We get out to the job. We find out this person is a meanie. We don't want to deal with them anymore. We want to fire them. So maybe you have a follow-up that maybe does nothing. Maybe you just don't want to have a closed whatever, but you'd love to be able to search based off of someone's status who's a mean customer. Maybe you want to maybe you just want to work for them again, but you don't want to ask them for a review or whatever it is. So now that status is available to you, and This is, again, a present-based status. So as soon as they get changed into it, their follow-up will all start and be scheduled from the day that they come into the status. Okay, here's another one that's kind of an interesting one. I'm going to customize this one. This will be a future-based status. This is scheduled the week of. Okay, so why would you use this status? So a scheduled job, maybe you by default are in your normal email. Let's say this was turned on. Maybe you're saying, hey, we just want to let you know that we have an appointment on this date arriving between this time and this time, which ResponsiBid will have all the data to do that. That's great. But maybe like in some of your exterior services, you just tell the customer, we will come sometime the week of this. Okay, so your email that you send after scheduling the job, so you would just send immediately after, I'd say 30 minutes. It'll go to the contact, and you'll just say to the contact, we'll see you soon. And then in here, you would use the merge field to say, we'll be arriving the week of, and then you'll grab your merge field. And this would be, oh, sorry, status dates. Chime in on this. I'm actually thinking that the scheduled date actually may be the same for all forward-based statuses. I don't know if that's true or not. I need to look into that. But this is a scenario where if I go in, oh, I didn't save that. Let me see if I can salvage that. I just typed all that stuff in. Boom. Okay. We'll be showing up the week of. So this might be a scenario where we go into a job and we put the status to scheduled the week of. And then when we go our scheduling, instead of scheduling it for a specific date, we always just choose the Monday of a week. And maybe you do want it to go to the calendar, maybe you don't if you have the Google Calendar integration. And when you click book it, the nice thing is that, let's see what happens here. Okay, it actually took. So this person is scheduled the week of, and the email they're going to get is going to, I don't think it liked the fact that I didn't have a subject, but then they'll get the actual date that you're going to show up on the week of, and you don't have to have that beginning arrival time and the ending arrival time. So that would be another example of a way you might need a custom status. Now the thing is that all these statuses represent, like I said, a part of the buying cycle. So you might need to find out, like you might need to change your workflow if you want to utilize the follow-up, and if you want to utilize the way that ResponsiBid tells you how your close rate is doing, or where your lead sources are bringing you the best leads. I apologize that this is just a test account. It's not showing us like real data. It's actually kind of bunk in a lot of ways. But the nice thing is that if you have been putting in the real data and people are staying in the right statuses, ResponsiBid will actually give you the legitimate information about your business that you wouldn't know otherwise. So this is just my cry to everybody who is using ResponsiBid just on their website. If you're using ResponsiBid for all of your in-person quotes, all of your phone quotes, all of your website quotes, and for all the quotes that your employees are giving out in the field as the neighbors come over or the other businesses come over and ask for a quote, not only are you going to automate the way that the bid is given, but these statuses will allow you to always have a frame of reference to where your people or your prospects are at and getting everyone to move further through the buying cycle. I'd rather have a declined bid in ResponsiBid than have someone in open for an extended amount of time, just because you're in control at that point. If you're just kind of letting everything hang out and just whatever happens from the website, you'll have two systems running simultaneously that are doing, one doesn't know what the other one's doing, possibly even working against each other. And you'll be more confident in your follow-up of the statuses if you're using it appropriately. Now, the final thing I wanted to show you was the call screen. Now, the call screen, the reason I'm showing you this in regard to statuses is that the call screen allows for a lot of really neat magic. I talk to people all the time who don't know this, so I'm going to share with you a couple things about the call screen before I get into the statuses. A lot of people don't realize that if someone called in and wanted a quote but didn't want to tell me their name, I can give an anonymous bid in ResponsiBid from the call screen. The smart form and the lightbox are basically just ways for you to test what would install on your website. So required fields are required in those areas. They are not required in the call screen. In the case of an anonymous bid, the only thing that's required is that they tell you how they heard about you. We do need to always know if it's commercial or residential. We need to know how many stories it is. We need to know if they have a basement or not. We need to know the house size. Again, still very anonymous data. We don't have to get their address. We don't need their phone number. We don't need their email address. We don't even need, actually, we do need to know the city they're in because city minimums do come into play. So once we know their city and these four pieces of information here, now we can start giving a quote through the call screen for that person. Okay, now obviously your modules that are turned on are going to be different, but once you move through this process, you can click on the bottom, Get Anonymous Bid. What that'll do is that'll put together a bid for this customer in a way that will have all the data you need if they do decide to give you their name and allow you to start actually following up with them appropriately. But until they give you that, your hands are not tied. You can still give a quote through ResponsiBid. And then you'll be able to just pick up where you left off. You're not going to get out a piece of paper, scratch it down, figure out a price, give them the price. Then they hang up. Then they call you back and they say, hey, I'm the person that called at 10 o'clock this morning. And then you go find that piece of paper and then you have to manually enter it into ResponsiBid when they finally give their information. None of that stuff. So anonymous bids is very, very cool from that perspective. The next thing that ResponsiBid can do, and I'm sure a lot of you are pretty aware of this, is that if you start typing in information, and it probably won't come up since I haven't, let me see if there's a test in here. Well, actually, I probably have so much conflicting information at this point that it can't find it. But if I just refresh the page here, I think there's a test person in here, Kurt. It starts using, there you go. It starts using actual fields in here to do live searches. And that's pretty cool too, right? I mean, if you've imported all your customers previously, or you've been using this for a while and you have other customers that are in, right from the call screen, you can find and either autofill the call screen or visit the profile of that person. So you can either start giving them new quotes on new things, or you can just go start rescheduling this customer into a new job. So that's, again, very, very cool. But here's one that a lot of people don't think about, and that is the visit for bids. So here's the scenario where the customer calls in. He says, hi, my name is John Doe. I live in Anaheim. I heard about you from Google, and I live in a house. Maybe they don't want to tell you that information. Maybe they don't even want to give you all that. They just say, I live in an enormous house, and there is no way you're going to give me a bid over the phone. Okay? That is what this button is for. Oh, can't visit them if I don't know their address. So I do need their address. Okay, so I know they live on that street in that city. That's good enough that we can now move through this process. Now, if I do this and I click visit for bid, at this point, I only have the information I've inputted. The neat thing about the visit for bid status is that you could say this is what they're interested in. You could get some of the specs maybe from them over the phone, whatever you need to. And then in the additional items or notes, you could say this customer has an enormously large house. He seemed very nice, but he's confused about this or that or the other. And he said that the other company that came out was really rude or whatever. Anything you put in here is going to really help the person out in the field on their mobile device. So when I click visit for bid and I say, we'll be out to give you a quote on the 31st, maybe you'll go ahead and give them an arrival time as well, depending how you get your follow-up set up. Obviously, we need to put in how long we think it's going to take if you're using the Google Calendar integration. Maybe it'll just take an hour. I'm not going to bother putting that onto my Google Calendar. And I'm going to click visit for bid. Now, the nice thing about doing this is that in my visit for bid, I am not only having them in that status and not only going to have them in that follow-up, which is kind of crazy. I got a bunch of stuff that no one would ever actually use. But now when the day comes to go give that bid, you click on Daily Digest, or you can search by status. You can see that I have an upcoming bid for John Doe, Anaheim. When I click on his name, I can actually visit him in the call screen. I can pick up where the office staff left off. So I'm going to give you an example here. I feel like I need to click it again. Okay, edit and call screen. So when I click on the call screen, you can see that maybe he's going to start giving me his phone number. Maybe he's going to give me his email address. But either way, I can see that here are the services that I'm supposed to be giving a quote on. Here's another service that I'm supposed to give a quote on. But here, I might decide to upsell him on something while I'm walking around the house. Boom, I just click it. And now I can move right into the exact quote, walk around the house and finish giving a quote on that. So Visit for Bid is a really awesome way to use the call screen to make it so that you can do all of the entry with a keyboard before the person gets out there with a tablet or a phone. So that's kind of a quick rundown on the statuses. I know I've kind of thrown a lot at you here in the last little bit, and you know, between the follow-up builder page where you can see all the statuses and then kind of how it interacts inside the customer profile. But that is in a nutshell the importance of statuses. Okay, where are they at in the buying cycle? How are we going to follow up with someone that way in the buying cycle? And what is the goal? Any follow-up that is in or associated with these in the buying cycle should be prompting us to get them to the next status that we want them to be in. And ideally, a customer will be scheduled. They'll automatically flip to closed. Closed will be trying to bump them back to scheduled. They call in, we get it scheduled up, and then we can do the job. They're closed. I'm trying to schedule, close, schedule, close. That's ideally where the customer is going to live after the bid's been given. But up until the point where they actually schedule a job, you may need to have a few different statuses, and you can do that with ResponsiBid. So I'm going to open it up to any questions that anyone might have, and hopefully I can see some chat here. Or if you want to unmute yourself, you can. But I cannot see. Does anybody have any status questions or tricks that they've used that they would like to share with the rest of you?
I got a quick question.
Yeah.
So the relationship, like, can we do customer tags, or what do you think the relationship between like customer statuses and then tags for them?
Yeah, great question. So tags is not something that we opted to go with when we initially built this. I think there is a day coming where tags are going to be important, but tags would be more like a feature about the customer. The reason we didn't go with tags initially was because tags, you could have multiple associated with them. Well, the problem with that is I don't want to have someone being followed up with 3 different ways and having kind of cross communication with unnecessary emails or text messages going out saying things that don't make any sense. Oh shoot, I forgot to take them out of that tag, or I forgot to do that. So status is beautiful because it automatically stops the previous follow-up and starts the new.
Okay.
But the benefit of tags, as I can see it in the future, is customers who tip, customers who you know, are difficult to work with, or just specific things that you could do to identify a lump of customers as an attribute.
Like for me, kind of seeing, okay, in the next 2 months coming up, what customers have closed for this graffiti service or whatever certain service, right? And then you can kind of get a view of where you want to focus and specify. Sorry.
Absolutely, and there will be a beautiful opportunity for us there with tags. Now, I don't know, as you were listening to, as I was talking about statuses, one of the nice things about statuses is that you always can be secure that if you wanted to set up, for example, a status that was specifically for graffiti customers, that's a perfect example because we would talk to them quite differently than someone we were doing like just cleaning work for. It's more like inspiration work. So in those cases, you might not even want to follow up with them in the close sequence the same way as like regularity. It might be, hey, did those taggers ever come back? Like, you know, a week later, stuff like that. So that status could help you to kind of not only just choose your focus, but also by the way you set up your follow-up, automate your focus. So
what about warranty service too? Like say, well, we can keep using graffiti, say offer 3 months of free cleanup if they come back in a short period of time or something. Do you think of a way we could manage that with statuses in terms of the last email you fired off of them has like a link or something for them to either change their status if they've come back through when you're offering a warranty service, and then they could hop out of warranty sort of thing?
Yes, exactly. So here is the perfect example. is I showed you how to make a closed mean customer status. Let's do a closed graffiti removal status. What you would do is that when that job's completed, you would, well, actually what you'd probably do is you would create a scheduled graffiti cleanup, and then you would auto flip that status at the very end. So one day after at midnight, you would auto flip to closed graffiti removal, and you wouldn't even have to do anything. You just, when you schedule it, you would schedule it as that job. They would get the, email saying, hey, we're going to come out and clean up graffiti. It'd be a very specific email to that job. Then it would automatically flip. And then what I would do is I would probably send out an email 3 days after that would just say, hey, I hope everything's still working great. I don't know if any of your, if anybody you've talked to that's ever had graffiti on their windows, obviously it's a very unique service that we offer. Kind of fish around for some referrals. And then I would probably throw in there something to the effect of, by the way, you do realize that if somebody comes back within X amount of time, that you just call this phone number and we'll be right back out to help you with that. And then, of course, you could follow up so that 2 weeks or 3 weeks, hey, just final check-in, your warranty's almost up, want to make sure that everything's still good. And then maybe 6 months after that, hey, I was just thinking about you today. I know we did a good job. And just change your follow-up as time is moving on.
So for me thinking, like I haven't set any of this up, but it'd be a good idea to sort of just draw my entire sales funnel process, figure out what all the key steps are, and then make sure that the statuses line up with that. And then same things like I'm just thinking about, a week before you show up for the service, okay, click here. Was there any other services you're interested in? You can kind of upsell and go back to that. And there's a lot of cool things. I like it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the ability to have custom statuses will make it so that there really isn't a situation you couldn't allow for. Cool. Any other questions?
One other unrelated to status question. Any idea how to turn off, can you turn off Chrome's like pre-fill on a specific site so that when I'm entering like in a call screen or anything like that, it's not adding to the database in the Chrome browser?
Oh, great question. Chrome, I have this love-hate relationship with Chrome. I think you know where I'm headed. The answer, in short, is no, not that I know of yet. Although I just looked at my Chrome and realized it'd probably be a cool thing to search through the Chrome plugin store.
Extensions, and see if like maybe you can blacklist the site or something like that.
Yeah. I was just thinking that might be cool. I don't know of one right now, and I have put up with it. We do a lot of testing here at ResponsiBid, so you can imagine I've got a lot of autofill like tester with test@synthesize.com on 123 Test Street.
I literally have the same problem just doing my small amount of testing on it, and I already get something at test.com popping up on different things. It's just
it's so annoying. I will look into that. I'm going to write that down, and I will get back with you about an extension. But the thing is Chrome is so fast and so reliable and so good, and then there's that, right?
Yeah. Oh, and just you got to think too in terms of if you have anyone else filling out vital customer information, it's going to stay with their browser wherever they are, whoever they're logged in as, kind of thing. In and above ResponsiBid, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think that any web-based CRM is going to give you the same fits as long as the fields are labeled. So Chrome is like super smart. Hey, first name, cool. Last name, I know what that is. And it starts saving that. I think this is going to be a pretty widespread problem. So hopefully we can find something like that. That'd be optimal. Any other questions? All right. Well, cool. This is going to be recorded. I'm going to put this up in the webinar area of ResponsiBid in the next couple days. And obviously you can refer back to it. I think some of the other users are going to be able to benefit from it. But at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that we all remember that the follow-up is only an appendage to the status. Okay, and I think that so many people think of the status as just the follow-up sequence. Status represents so much more than that. Status is just follow-up is an appendage to what stage the customer is in the buying cycle. And now that you kind of understand what the default statuses are and what cover areas they cover, now custom statuses make a lot probably more sense to you. I would hope that this is the time when I am going to be able to go in and account for this particular scenario. So I hope that clarity is good for you. But oh, I just got a link. So I'm gonna do a little more research. I'll email this link out to you guys if it's right. But there's a superuser.com link I have here that talks about removing autocomplete fields in Google Chrome. So let me research this a little bit more. And thank you, Neil. I appreciate that. This might be just the ticket that we're looking for. So
cool.
All right, guys. If there's no other questions, we kept it under an hour, and hopefully this was a great use of your time. And obviously, all of our webinars are going to build upon the knowledge that we're building here. So the next webinar that we have will be discussing the daily digest and how to use it to mine through your work list of each day. Once you're using statuses properly, this will naturally be exactly what you want to do. So we'll get on that next time. Have a good one, and talk to you guys soon.
Beauty. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll see you.